Welcome to you, the listener, to this custom deep dive. Today, we're pulling from some really fascinating excerpts of the Great Sleigh Winter.
Yeah, it's a completely wild story.
It really is. Our mission here is exploring how pioneers in Montana's Bitterroot Valley back in 1892 managed to survive a brutal 5-month freeze. I mean, the ground entirely disappeared under solid ice.
Just completely vanished.
Right. So, okay, let's unpack this. We see winters hit -40 in Montana today, but why did this specific freeze fundamentally break the region's infrastructure?
Well, it was a complete anomaly. The region normally relies on the Chinook, which is this rapid, warm downslope wind that periodically melts the snowpack.
Like a natural reset button.
Exactly. But that year, the Chinook essentially skipped its shift. Temperatures plummeted to -40 degrees Fahrenheit and just stayed there.
Without any thaw.
Right, without that thaw cycle, the snow compacted continuously. So by New Year's Day, you're looking at a valley that is a 4 to 6 foot deep, featureless white sea.
And their industrial age infrastructure just, wasn't built for that kind of sustained compacted ice.
Not at all.
I was reading about the Northern Pacific Railway's rotary snowplows.
Yeah.
You'd think these massive steam-powered machines could handle the drifts, but the text notes, they completely failed.
Right, because those rotary plows were designed for loose powder. When they hit this densely packed snow, the mechanical failure was just absolute. One rail worker actually described the machinery as being about as useful as a butter knife against a granite boulder.
A butter knife against a granite boulder. That paints quite a picture. So if the trains are dead and shoveling out a 6-foot ice block is impossible, how are people actually moving around? The logistics of that are hard to wrap your head around.
What's fascinating here is the sheer scale of their adaptation. They engineered what were essentially sky roads.
Sky roads.
Yeah, they built these massive wooden snow rollers. Think drums that were 8 feet tall and 10 feet wide. And they pulled them with teams of heavy horses to crush and compact the snow rather than trying to displace it. So they created these elevated ice highways, suspended a full 5 feet above the actual dirt roads.
Which creates this surreal situation where you're driving a sleigh right over a neighbor's fence line, and you can just look down at their chimney.
It really was.
But it sounds incredibly precarious, because if a horse stepped just a few inches off that rolled path, it plunged into the soft powder like a trapdoor.
Precisely. It was high-stakes sleighing. And if going outside meant risking a plunge through the ice, staying indoors wasn't much better. Because how were they getting fuel if the trains were dead? Coal shipments had stopped entirely.
Which leads to what the author calls the living room migration. Families were forced to huddle in their kitchens behind heavy wool blankets, just creating this tiny microclimate around the stove.
Right, and they were burning slab wood.
Just the rough, cheap outer cuts from the local sawmills, trying to survive.
Yeah.
One pioneer noted that if you set your tea down just 6 feet from the stove, it would skin over with ice before you could even finish it.
6 feet away. The isolation was just absolute. No passable roads, no trains, which meant no doctors. They had to rely entirely on frontier pharmacy.
Right, boiling willow bark for pain.
Which actually contains the active compound found in aspirin, and they brewed pine needle tea to stave off scurvy.
And then there's the pneumonia treatment. The infamous onion poultice, strapping a dozen hot, mushy roasted onions to a patient's chest. Even if it didn't magically cure the cough, the folklore admits it at least kept coughing neighbors at a safe distance.
It definitely worked for social distancing.
So what does this all mean? The survival tactics show incredible resilience, but it seems like this winter was a true inflection point for the region.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it fundamentally transformed the Bitterroot Valley's entire economic model. Before 1892, ranchers relied on the open range method. They essentially let cattle wander vast, unfenced areas to forage for grass under the loose snow.
Which works fine until the ground is sealed under a foot of solid ice.
Exactly. The sharp ice crust acted like a serrated knife. The cattle couldn't dig through to eat, and their legs were decimated just trying to move. It resulted in mass starvation, leaving behind what one rancher described as a valley of bones.
A valley of bones. So it wasn't just a tough season. It was the abrupt end of the cowboy era in that valley.
It had to be. The open range was proven financially and practically unsustainable. The surviving ranchers were forced to pivot immediately to hay-growing farmers.
They had to start building barns and cultivating feed.
Right, and digging irrigation ditches to sustain their herds through winter. It forced the modernization of Montana's agricultural infrastructure overnight.
It's a stark reminder of how quickly modern systems can fail and how aggressively a community has to pivot to survive. So the next time you're frustrated about scraping your windshield on a cold morning, think of that Bitterroot grit. At least you aren't navigating roof-level ice highways, and thankfully you don't have to smell like roasted onions for 3 weeks.
That is very true. But there is one final mystery I want to leave you with to ponder. The state legislature officially created the brand new Ravalli County on March 3rd, 1893, right in the absolute dead of this freeze.
Right in the middle of it.
Yes. So if the trains were abandoned, the mail was stopped, and the valley was entirely isolated as a lost island, how exactly did these buried settlers manage to communicate with the state government to legally execute a political divorce?